Claudia Baez.
I'm Matt Nasser.
I'm Bartholomew Bland.
And this is How Does the Art World Work? It's 5th episode. Today, it's just going to be the three of us. We have no guests. The reason why is because it's the middle of the summer and everybody's away having a great time at the beach. We're here in the city taping this, and we thought that we needed to talk more about ourselves and less about the guests. So the reason why a couple of guests are not here, besides it being the summertime, is because lots of people in the art world have lots of secrets. I've discovered, and it's interesting, their secrets. So we might talk about their secrets as well.
I think it's secrets, but I think there's a fear of saying the wrong thing. We're not really like broadcasting to the masses, but I feel like the guests get very nervous about
an unstructured format where we might ask them difficult questions. Yes, that's true. But you raise a good point about it being entering the dog days of summer, and the art world does go into mercifully a little bit of a hiatus at this time of year, and certain galleries move to places like the Hamptons, Quag, places like that.
There's a new gallery in Quag.
Is there?
It's called Alex. Alex is the name of my husband. But I'm going to stop by and check it out. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but it's interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
And although there seems to be lots of art happening in New York still, I just went to an opening where you have paintings in, what is it? What was the gallery?
The Circle Gallery?
The Circle Gallery. You have paintings there, and you have paintings at...
we have like a design show. Natalie Card Gallery.
Yeah.
How long is the show uptown?
Uptown is still up. It's up the whole month. Yes,
July.
That is a show at Laurie Bookstein Gallery. So I am showing in 3 places.
Laurie Bookstein Gallery. I thought that was a very beautiful show, and it was almost sort of the archetypal summer show, but I thought done with an interesting twist, in that it had, an array of stuff from most of the 20th century, going back to Milton Avery and some of the early ashcan painters, urban scenes from the early 20th century, right up to today. But I thought that they were all pretty well structurally linked, and it was really kind of a refreshing sort of moment to enter summer. And I loved some of the pieces that they had on display.
I think so. I think it's a beautiful show. And they called it Mercury Rising. At first, I'm like, what does it mean, Mercury Rising?
Do you think it was astrology?
I thought so at first.
Yes.
But I guess it has to do with the heat of the summer.
And it certainly is. We're coming off a huge heat wave, right?
Yeah.
That reminds me of something I was looking at, just headlines, that there was a wax sculpture of Lincoln in D.C. that because of the heat wave has melted. And while in the process of melting, there was lots of memes and the internet blowing up about how Lincoln looked depressed, how he looked really sad about our country. And it was... and
all too apropos.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of how does the artwork work, this idea of your work becoming meme worthy or reaching the masses through social media seems to like make art stars from just like...
Perhaps it's better to be art comets who are just sort of shrieking across the internet sky, but not really holding a stationary or fixed position of any duration.
You want it like a one-hit wonder?
Yes, a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
That's another way of describing it. Well, of course, that we get back to Warhol's. Everyone has their 15 minutes of fame before obscurity closes in again on them. That's all right.
Well, it is true that sometimes the art world picks up somebody, a rising star, and then brings them to millions and then drops them.
Yes. But then perhaps that's okay, because a lot of people, they have something to say, sort of like authors that have one good book in them. And they have their moment. They do achieve something, whatever they have to put out there in the world. And then that's enough. And maybe, it might not be okay for the artists that the world moves on. They may not like that, but it may be that they've actually delivered in their cornucopia of gifts the one best piece of fruit they have to offer.
It's not easy making art. It really isn't easy. I've been trying to write a personal statement and to talk about what it is that I do. And basically, my theories and what I want to do, what I want to accomplish through art, basically is just to tap into my unconscious and make something beautiful. I mean, that's the bottom line of what I'm trying to do every time I'm in front of a blank canvas. But that being said, there's so many different ways to go there or to produce. And nowadays, with all the technology, it's just, it's like infinite, all the many ways that people can make something, like a wax sculpture, for example. It's just incredible, the amount of alternatives that you have in front of you.
But get back to the core question of you working as a practicing artist. How do you know if something is not going well? And I've worked with artists who have been fairly prominent. They thought, their careers were going well, but they secretly didn't like the art that they were making, but everyone else seemed to like it. And it was sort of, they felt they were on the wrong path, but it was selling, they were getting good reviews, and they were sort of secretly discontent, but didn't know what to do. I mean, do you think that's common? There's like a gap between what the art world is perceiving versus what the artists themselves? Or do you think most artists, if it's going well and they're getting acclaim, that's enough?
I think there's an element of imposter syndrome that happens to anybody that gets any sort of success in any field. I was talking with I'm also an actor, as we've said, and talking with some friends that are well-known actors, and I just feel like I feel like, should I be doing this? I can't judge the quality of what I'm putting out there. And, he's like, that's never gonna go away. Like, that's just gonna be this, he's an acclaimed award-winning actor. Is like, I still am like, am I doing a good job here? I don't know. And so I can see that as what is happening with those artists you mentioned.
Well, there's always a million reasons not to do something, right? And the truth of the matter, you could always probably find someone who could do it better than you. But if you could do it okay, then keep going, right?
Going.
What is the other option?
Well, the truth of the matter is all artists have self-doubt, like you say. And at the same time, they have this self-grandiose feeling. So I either feel like I'm nothing or I feel like I'm everything. But there's no middle ground. It's not like, oh, I'm mediocre. No, I'm never that. I'm never mediocre. I'm either great.
It'd almost be worse to be flaming out as a disaster than to be just blah.
Disaster. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, I go from one point of view to the other. But I was listening to the Alec Baldwin episode about the forgeries, and it's so fun and so interesting. I'm sorry to be plugging it, but he is just fantastic. He talks directly about what it is, all the forgeries that are going on in the world, and super interesting. And really, the problem is you can't say that's a fake because then they sue you for defamation. So you can know that you're looking at a fake, but you cannot say it. They sue you. Isn't that interesting?
Well, there are fakes that are discovered, so someone has to say it, or there must be.
I know, but it's very hard to get there. It's very hard for the person that knows to say this is a fake.
Wow.
That's why they got away with so much for so long. Those people with an older gallery. I mean, they sold millions of dollars.
I wonder if the people making the fakes have self-doubt. They're making a good enough fake.
Good enough fake around the.
Am I doing the right thing in my life?
Think about the Orlando Museum of Art. They had that big Basquiat show, and then it turned out most of the Basquiats were forgeries. And I'm sure when you, if you're in an institution and that has very severely damaged that institution and sort of its academic credibility and everything else. But I'm sure in many of these situations, you're in a position where something seems really good, and is it too good to be true, and you're never quite sure. You always sort of want to be optimistic rather than constantly doubting, but I think you have to be very cautious when you get into what you're going to put your stamp of approval onto.
Also, and what you're going to buy, if you're going to be spending millions of dollars, you have to make sure it comes from the provenance is crucial.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's something fascinating for me with going to flea markets and discovering things, because what happens is people die and they leave things behind, and the people that get them don't necessarily do the research or find out exactly what they have. I have a friend that I went to her apartment, and I can't say her name. Went to her apartment. I saw this painting. I said, "This is a masterpiece. This is a fantastic painting. Wow, where did you get it?" She's like, "Oh, I inherited it from my mom." Like, well, you have a museum piece here. She didn't believe me. She doesn't care whatever I say. Didn't sound to her like I knew what I was talking about. But that being said, I grew up looking at art. My mother, when she was little, her mother used to smoke a lot. And in the cigarettes, in the matches, there came images of Cézanne or Monet or different beautiful paintings. And my mother saw those paintings in those matches. So she always wanted to make art, my mom. And so she brought me up since I was 9 years old, took me to make art. She gave me a postcard, said, "Make me this." So I've been painting forever, and I've been taken to museums forever. And the game in the museum is like, what's the name of that artist? What's the name of that artist? Whoever could say it first, me and my brother. So we grew up looking forever. So I knew this painting was a masterpiece, 100%. And she didn't believe me. So then just recently I spoke to her son. I said, "Do you know that you have I guess I can say this. They have a Franz Marc.
Okay.
You know you have a Franz Marc in your mantelpiece." And he goes, "What are you talking about? What's a Franz Marc?" So he Googles it. They have a $50 million painting on their mantelpiece.
Oh boy.
I should get a finder's fee, don't you think?
Yeah.
I think you shouldn't have said anything and tried to get it into your purse. But there you go.
Oh, that thing. How much you want for that?
I'll take it. I'll take it off your
$10.
back.
I'm unaware of who that is.
It's
Well,
okay.
And
Good.
what an interesting thing. It's a good segue because I was just looking at a clutch of some of the world's greatest Franz Marcs. I just came from London, where I was at a show about German Expressionism. Of course, Franz Marc being one of the key figures of that.
Okay, thank you.
I was very lucky to tour the exhibition with a woman who's a friend of mine who is a great world-renowned expert on German Expressionism. So she was talking to me about the interaction between the half a dozen of these personalities. And of all the expressionists they had on the wall, I think Franz Marc just leaps off the canvas. And he's got sort of he was part of the group, the Blue Rider. At the Guggenheim, they have his yellow cow that looks like it's sort of jumping over the moon. You know, I think that's probably the best known of the Franz Marcs in New York. But there aren't a lot of his paintings in the U.S.
There was one in the Fondation Marthe in Saint Paul de Vence, which I saw recently, which reminded me of the one I saw in my friend's house.
Yes.
So I hadn't seen her in a while. I mean, I told her about this Franz Marc a long time ago, and she completely ignored me. But when I saw her son again, I'm like, "Oh, well, do you know about this painting you have?" So I think your daughter should inherit it, and she can live a very happy life, or at least a free life.
Free life, very important. She'll have the freedom to lead an artistic life in a way. Franz
I
Marc
also
probably would
offered that I
enjoy.
could bring any expert to come and see and all these things. I offered many services. I haven't heard back.
Oh, well, I'm sure they're doing their
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 due
own
diligence. Their due
research.
diligence.
Speaking of a
Yes.
free life, another topic that I was reading was there was a survey of artists in New York State, and almost 60% of them make $25,000 or less. So you better have some other.
You better have a Franz Marc over your mantelpiece.
Because I don't know
How you
how
live.
is someone surviving on that. I mean, that's
Of course, the answer is they're getting second jobs that have nothing to do with art. Yes,
I
one
mean,
would assume.
I hope. I mean, and they said most of these people are living in New York City, so I don't know how that works. So, I mean, this is a world that there's a lot of passionate people that are sacrificing a lot to be an artist. If you're making that kind of money in the city,
How do you do
you're
it?
homeless.
I have another fun story about like a famous painting. A friend of mine. Did I tell you this one
Well,
already?
okay,
The
let's
Wayne
not talk
Thiebaud?
about the poor artists. Let's
No.
go back to
But
the
these are-
$50 million.
No, but these are poor artists. This is what happened.
Okay.
This girl inherits a little tiny cupcake, a Wayne Thiebaud cupcake.
Oh, okay.
And she sells the Wayne Thiebaud cupcake and buys a townhouse in Brooklyn. And
That's
in
so
that
nice.
townhouse, she rents half of it.
Joe
And the
Cupcake
other-
Store.
Then she lives herself and her husband
That's wonderful.
Happily ever after, creating art.
So I mean, this is
Musicians.
a thing that I was bringing up with your husband, and he doesn't believe art is a good investment. But people.
The problem is it's a random investment.
It's a random investment, but
the,
I think it should be a part of anyone's portfolio. I think it is a part of it, and it's like you're taking chance on that stock or that thing. Take a chance on some art,
but I mean,
as a part, not like put your savings into it, but make it part of the portfolio.
Well, of course, the artists have tried to do that to monetize in various pension schemes and trusts where artists sort of go into cooperatives, pool their work with the anticipation that of 100 working, practicing artists, 1 or 2 will become world famous, and then they'll split up the profits and divide. But it doesn't seem to ever really quite work out the way.
Yeah.
There's sort of a utopian idea underlying it that we're going to sort of have this communal pot, and I think there's ultimately some sort of resistance to it. Or I suppose you could have 100 pretty well-known artists contributing to it and none of them break through. Then it would be very depressing.
Very sad.
Very sad.
But if some do break through, and how do they divide the pot? There could be a little bloodshed there.
And that's true.
But
Either that or
that's
as a
agreed
plan,
upon.
you give everyone a Tebow cupcake. And I think...
So Bart, tell us
yes.
about what you're up to. Because we haven't heard what you're up to these days. And you too, what are you up to? You're acting? You're not acting?
I am.
What's
I'm going to
happening?
be in a musical next month. That's going to be...
How fun.
It's a musical that's sort of between... it's like performance art, I would say. It's closer to performance art. At the Wild Project on July 19th to the 21st.
Is that Wild like
It's
Oscar
called
Wilde?
G. No, like
Wild.
Wild Project. It's close here on 3rd Street. So come. We're plugging things, I guess.
Yeah, let's plug. What are you up
Okay,
to? How's
I'm-
your chandelier show?
My chandelier show, our chandelier show, is coming along very well. It's called Incandescence, the Chandelier in Contemporary Art. It's opening at 3 venues during the month of September, and I'm frantically working away on it. I was just poring over my checklist before I came to film with you guys today, so it's very exciting. We're getting down to the final, adding the final artists, and I have high hopes for it. So I hope that in September, perhaps our guests will be drawn from the pool of the chandelier artists. We can have some of them come on, and we can add a chandelier to our distinguished backdrop here. It's fun. It's
How did you
wonderful.
come up with this idea?
It's an idea I've had for a long time. I've really wanted to explore it, and several of my colleagues joined me on it, and I've always been interested in beauty, in contemporary art. When I started at the Flagler Museum in Palm Beach many years ago, they had knockoff Louis XV chandeliers, knockoff Louis XVI chandeliers, reproductions, from the Gilded Age, but very beautiful. And I used to think about them and think about the sort of high-low aspect of the chandelier, that they were kind of a great mannerist Baroque symbol, along with the grand staircase of that period. They represent domination and power, but they also have a real class connotation of kind of tackiness, one of Donald Trump's casinos, banana republics and dictators, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of work in the show that's actually, sometimes when I talk to people about doing a chandelier show, they're like, oh, well, that's fun, or it's going to be design. But actually, most of the artists who are in the show have very specific kind of political agendas. Sort of the idea of the crashing and falling chandelier, chandeliers made out of banana leaves, blood, sweat, and tears, barbed wire, gilded drones. There's a lot of interesting work, so I'm excited about it.
I've never associated beauty and overhead lighting.
Yes, that's true. Very notoriously unflattering, but perhaps the chandelier is a sculptural object rather than good lighting in from the sides, right? It came from the window. And we've had a lot of very interesting curatorial debates about what constitutes a chandelier. Does it actually have to illuminate? Does it have to be electrified in some ways, or have a lighting mechanism? Or is it enough that if it's a sculptural hanging object and the artist calls it a chandelier in the title, that's kind of what we settled on, is like whether the piece had already been designated as a chandelier by the artist. We would let it go through, as I like to say.
Even if it doesn't give any light?
In certain cases, yes. We have people who have done works, and also
that would constitute a mobile.
Well, not if it takes on a traditional chandelier form. Like there are if you close your mind and you think about what a chandelier looks like, there's a definite image that is conjured up, and we have some people who are striking quite close to that. But the chandelier could be melting or falling apart or smashed on the ground. So yeah. We're letting those go through, but we jettisoned quite a number of hanging mobiles and things that were just dangling sculptures,
Exactly.
as opposed to
Chandeliers.
Chandeliers, yes, exactly. Also, out sconces, no
They're
sconces,
out.
candelabras for a different show.
Yeah, different show.
Better lighting, but
better
out.
lighting,
They're out.
yes, exactly. Up. Next time it'll all be about uplighting from the ground.
That's
Also,
scary.
people working with light, but they weren't really working with it in a chandelier form. So that was kind of an interesting, thing.
I was reading something that I think it's important to talk about. Is beauty. In order for it to qualify as beauty, it has to have value. That was the premise of this article I was reading.
Preciousness about it in some sort.
Like value. It has to have value in order for it to be beautiful. I never thought about it that way.
I don't think so at all. No, I think
No, because a flower is beautiful.
Exactly.
Well, it
But
does
the
have
flower
value.
before is well, I mean, the difference. Here's a question for you that I have tried to address on many occasions. What is the difference between something that's beautiful and something that's pretty? Is it just a question of degrees, and that the beautiful object is several degrees prettier than a pretty object? I would argue that the beautiful object, what it has to have is the unexpected about it, and that tremendous numbers of things are pretty, but beautiful has to have something offbeat, slightly opposed to the sort of classical equation that's going to give you a jolt. A good example, I think, is movie stars. The ones that tend to become movie stars are never supermodels, and they usually have something. Either their heads are too large, or their lips are too big, or there's something about the proportion. There's some where beauty moves close to an ideal sort of set of proportions and then violates it in some way.
This new class of movie star, there have been articles about the rat movie star. They all look kind of like rats, or mice, or rat men movie stars. Yeah, I don't know. That's like the thing now, that they're kind of
Ratty looking.
Perhaps that signals the decline
Like
of the
who?
movie star as a
Yeah, the
cultural
decline.
phenomenon.
It started
they
happening.
bring up the people from Challengers, the tennis movie.
Uh-huh.
Those guys who aren't conventionally good looking, but are good looking, and Timothy Chalamet a bit, and the guy from The Bear. And anyway,
It all started
I think there's pain
going
in
in
beauty.
that direction.
Do you think there's pain in
I
beauty?
think
Value
there's
and
got to
pain?
be an emotional response. There's sort
An
of
ache.
like an ache, right? There's an ache when you see something beautiful in a way where it's pretty. I think it's just pretty, and that it doesn't affect you in an emotional level.
But don't you think there is, aside from like the conventionally attractive, this idea of something beautiful, I think can have poetry. That pain can be aging, something shattered, something broken.
Also, the other thought I
the
think is
frequency.
like for example, I will always see a Woody Allen movie, even though I believe he's a despicable human being. But when you create something, you don't have to like the person. It doesn't matter who Picasso slept with. It doesn't matter to me. I love his work. The
Mhm.
work itself speaks for itself. It doesn't have to be. You have to be in love with the person
referendum.
and respecting the person's attitudes or beliefs or however he behaves in life. That's irrelevant to me. It's about the work.
I think it's also, I mean, as an artist moves through time, dies and leaves their oeuvre, and the date of the production moves further and further away from the actual life of the artist, it's easier to separate them from their work. And that's another way of saying it's easier to begin to form a real judgment about their work and where it fits in the whole pantheon of artistic achievement, because, the vast majority of things just kind of dwindle down and diminish. And
Well, like
what are we left with?
my
The
grandson
tiniest-
put it, he's 4 years old. Art lives forever, but people die.
Mm.
But,
That's so cute.
as a cute God, I think it
Sigh.
would be so sobering. But I think art doesn't live forever. I mean,
It doesn't?
a tiny percentage of it lives forever, and the rest is obscured is consigned along with its maker to the dustbin of history.
One of those pieces is famously the Mona Lisa, right? And last sort of current events is the French government is not going to pay for the proposal of having the Mona Lisa in its own room,
Museum,
with its
right?
museum, like its own room with a separate entrance. And so it lives forever, but it's not as valued as it once was, maybe. But I think that would be a fabulous idea, because half the time you want to go to the Louvre and you don't want to. I mean, there's people that just want to go take a selfie with the Mona Lisa. They have to see the Mona Lisa, and then the rest of the museum, it's like, let me go to that.
But it's interesting, things that have sort of declining cultural currency. And one of them is the sort of, strangely enough, the big three. It's at the Louvre, it's the Mona Lisa, the Winged Victory, and the Venus de Milo. And I think the Venus de Milo has kind of faded from people's consciousness of the big three. I've been there to the Louvre maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 years and gone to see the Venus de Milo. And there's always a few people milling around, but it's not. It has nothing, I think, maybe like the cultural currency it did 50 years ago.
Which one is the Winged Victory? I didn't know about these
sculpture
big three.
At the top of the staircase.
Yes. That's the Venus de Milo? Or
no,
that's the
Winged
Winged
Victory. That's Winged Victory.
And where's the Venus
Which is
de
not
Milo?
its real name. Somewhere downstairs in another part of the museum, but
okay, I missed it.
We got to go back and hopefully not be in that line for the Mona Lisa.
Exactly. Or they should do what you have at the Tower of London with the crown jewels. They put you on a conveyor belt and sort of slowly inch you past it, which I think might be good for the Mona Lisa. It would give everyone a brief, although very close up view. You'd have your moment and just be pushed along to the end, whether you liked it or not.
That's definitely a good idea. Yes. How was your London trip?
It was wonderful. I saw the German Expressionism show. I saw an exhibition of John Singer Sargent, fashioning Sargent, which had debuted at the MFA in Boston and had been reworked at Tate Britain, in a very interesting way. That exhibition was curious because Sargent is one of my favorite painters, but the costumes that they had were, mostly women who sat for him. And clearly it was an event to be sat for because they had people who had there were scraps of velvet and said, my beloved aunt was wearing this gown when John Singer Sargent painted her in 1905. And then they had about maybe a half dozen of the whole costumes, which were very interesting to see, but were completely lacking in life. They were interesting historically, but they didn't convey at all what Ellen Terry, when she was playing Lady Macbeth, might have been like. And in Sargent's full-length portrait of her crowning herself, a scene that doesn't actually occur in the play, it's incredibly vivid. And then her gown is there and it's interesting, but it looks more like a bad Halloween costume, that's kind of aged and
it's very hard to present
but that's where
gowns in a good light.
Exactly. But that's where you see the magic of the artist transforming something that could be fairly pedestrian, but just his imagination sort of taking off and kind of making it immortal.
Yeah, I love how he paints the clothes. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah. What do you think about your London experience?
Yeah,
I was with you, but
we didn't get as much of. We were working, so
working very hard.
It was very well received, our booth, and we were trapped there. But always fun to be in London.
Yeah,
it's a great city.
I love London.
Notable people at the booth at the show that you thought trends that might be emerging.
One of the, I don't know. Lots of portraiture. Lots of portraits.
That's interesting. That's a return to Sargent, right?
Yeah.
There's never going to be a lack of people wanting to aggrandize themselves.
We saw Cabaret. That was fantastic.
Oh, we saw Cabaret.
That was fantastic.
I tried to get...
Talk about rat people.
I had some dinner plans that fell apart at about 7:00 one evening. I tried to get the last ticket for Cabaret, and someone beat me to it online. I was very bitter. But now it's come to New York, so I can see it here. It's
Yes.
a production, right?
And
I wonder if it's going to be presented in the same way.
It's
in
the same
London, it
production.
was a cabaret.
Yeah.
And you sat in little chairs with little lights.
it's the same.
So nice.
It's the same exact
Same
production.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, the same people are coming.
No, it's different people, same costumes, design, everything. You know,
okay.
Yeah, different locations.
Got it.
It's funny. It's something that has some work of art that has a real tensile strength to it, and Cabaret is one of those. Although I think, Cabaret is a rare example of a good musical that was turned into a great movie. And it's not that often that happens where the source material is good, but
One
the
Flew
film
Over the
is
Cuckoo's
better.
Nest. I
That's
saw that in a
interesting.
play, and it was better. I saw it in San Francisco as a young girl many years ago, and it was also like a square, people around, and they all did it in the center. And to me, it was better than the movie.
But
Well, yeah.
I mean,
And
I love the movie.
To
but-
translate that into art, I think a picture of the Mona Lisa might be better than the sitting there going through that line.
the Mona
Seeing
Lisa
it.
backlit,
Yeah,
and blown
Mona
up.
Lisa, yes, Warhol style.
Warhol
No,
style.
Do you
It's
guys
funny
think
that
we
Warhol never
spoke-
did the Mona Lisa.
Oh no,
That I know.
Marilyn,
Maybe he
don't know.
did.
No, I think he probably didn't.
But I can't think of it. Well, he went through the whole thing with the Last Supper and that whole cycle.
Yeah.
You would think of anyone who had just sort of instant painting for fame. Maybe he felt it was so famous there's nothing he could do with it that was going to improve.
He did it
comment
all.
on
She wasn't pretty
anyway.
enough.
She
But
did
she's
it all. Warhol
beautiful.
did it all.
She's beautiful.
I'm not so sure about that.
Sullen can be beautiful. That's
I'm not
my
so
takeaway.
sure that I think she's beautiful.
You don't think she's beautiful?
No, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Well,
I don't know what the big
How about
hype
Lady
is.
with an Ermine? She's better.
I really never understood the big hype around the Mona Lisa. I have to be honest. I mean, I understand it's a beautifully painted rendered painting, but I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't give me any like major.
Well,
Soul
people
moving.
become victims of objects become victims of their own fame. And it's sort of, going to see the Mona Lisa, it's sort of like going to see the Grand Canyon or some natural phenomenon. You're supposed to have a sublime moment. And then if that moment does or did not come, it's a very sort of crushing kind of soul.
Depressing.
It's depressing, and it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, that you
Exactly.
aren't plugged into some like eternal existential greatness that it's somehow eluded you. I mean, I never felt that way about the Mona Lisa. I've seen it a dozen times at least. But I will say, like,
It moves you? It moves you?
it never moved me. I was just sort of like,
okay.
okay, well, that's good, and you appreciate it, and you learn about it, and you read about it, and that's all very well. But
What does move you?
well, I was thinking when I went to Milan and I saw the last Supper on the wall of the Priory
Fresco.
there. Yeah, the fresco. It is unbelievable. And part of it is because it sort of confounded my expectations a little bit. I had seen it so often in reproduction. I honestly went in not anticipating to be as huge as it was. And one of the wonderful things about going to see The Last Supper, not wonderful, but is because it's in such an advanced state of decay and deterioration, they only let in maybe 50 people at a time. The guide speaks to you for about 10 minutes about it and then leaves you in silence and contemplation. And it's not like there's people constantly coming and going. You're in a fixed group in this room alone, and then you have your moment with it. And that to me is much more satisfying.
how theatrical.
Yes, it's true. It's a theatrical presentation. The best presentation I ever saw of any painting was Victory Boogie Woogie by Mondrian in Rotterdam. It's alone. It's enormous. It's way bigger than any other Mondrian I ever saw. You go into the room. I didn't even know they had it. It's an enormous room. It's all in dark. The painting is spotlit. And when I was there, they were blasting Glenn Miller at like a 10 level decibel. And it sort of brought home to you what it must have been like, how thrilled Mondrian must have been by the end of the war, how triumphant it must have felt. It's just a great theatrical moment.
Amazing. Well, more theatrical moments with guests next time.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. We're going to
I'm
Our
go.
summer
Claudia
friends.
Baez. Have a good summer.
I'm Matt Nasser. Have a cool summer.
I'm Bartholomew Bland. Have a hot summer.
Ooh. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.